Hello, Rehan. Delighted to be speaking to you today. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself
Yeah.
and Quantuma and the services that you offer?
Are you right? No, absolutely. I'm Rehan Ahmed. I'm one of the managing directors of Quantuma. We're an advisory firm specialising in business restructuring, turnaround and insolvency.
Wow.
And I'm an insolvency practitioner myself, so I deal with a lot of the restructuring and insolvency parts of the business. So as a firm now, we are over 500 staff.
Amazing.
And various different locations across the country, as well as a couple of international sites as well. So quite a big organisation to what it was a couple of years ago when we started.
Wow.
We deal with a full spectrum of small companies to mid-size. So a lot of our clients are in that mid-market space, where we assist, whether it's through formal insolvency procedures, looking to raise funds to help businesses, sometimes avoid insolvency. Sometimes we also do deal with M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and solvent liquidations as well as insolvency liquidation. So we are a full advisory service with a bit of a specialism in restructuring and insolvency.
Fantastic. When you say international, where are you based internationally?
So a lot of our sites sound exotic, and they are quite exotic locations. So we've got places like Cyprus, Cayman Island, BVI, Dubai, Middle East, and Singapore. So whilst they are fantastic holiday locations, they are strategic locations. They're not there to go on a jolly. We do have manned offices in all these locations, and they are, if you look at where a lot of the world's money flows, these are the locations where a lot of the world's money is flowing. So we are there for strategic purposes, because when we do a lot of international restructuring or large-scale insolvency matters, magically, a lot of the time money has gone to these locations. So it's not a case of these are great for holidays. We're there for a reason.
Amazing. So what are the potential benefits for directors and shareholders in an insolvency situation?
So when it comes to restructuring insolvency, as a director of a company, they have a duty to deal with the financial affairs as early and as quick as possible. So one of the things that they need to be doing is, if there is some sort of issues with the company, they need to be dealing with them, because if they fail to deal with the financial affairs, they could either become personally liable for any debts that have arisen, or potentially being disqualified from being a director. So whilst a lot of people think that the company is a limited liability company and all debts sit in the company, if as a director you're not dealing with it, you could also become personally liable and get disqualified. So the director has a duty of care to his company, his staff, the creditors, to make sure that he's dealing with the problem. So the one thing I say to a lot of people is, if you have an issue, even if it's a little kink in the business, go take some professional advice, and don't just sit on it. Because what you find is, we tend to get a lot of people where they bury their head in the sand, and they avoid any problems. They think they can get out of it, or there's a magic wand somewhere that will make everything disappear. And I keep saying to people, don't wait till the last minute. Come take advice as early as possible, because the earlier you come, the more options we will have available to you. Because sometimes, let's say for example, someone comes to me and says, we've lost the contract, it's worth 10% of our business, so what can we do? Or where, we need a 50 grand, there's a 50 grand shortfall in our cash flow. And in those scenarios, you might be able to say, okay, fine, let's see if you can go speak to a bank or a funder, and potentially give you a little bit of cash injection to help save the business, or try to keep the business running. Sometimes they'll come to me 6 months down the line and say, we lost that contract, this member of staff went, that person went, and now the bank are saying we want our £2 million back tomorrow. And you're looking and thinking, so we just need to liquidate it now, because that's the only option we have, or we just have to shut this whole thing up. So what I say to a lot of businesses is, you need to, as a director, you need to deal with the problems yourself as soon as possible, but come to us, or come to go take professional advice as early as possible, because there's more options available. So that's the main thing I would say with those kind of businesses, is get in early and take the advice.
And get the right advice as well.
Also true.
From professionals like yourself.
Also true, because and that's also a relevant point, is get the right advice, from the right people, because there's a lot of people out there who are business advisors, and there are people, there are accountants, and there's lawyers out there. And I always say to people, don't go to, let's say a lawyer, for example, don't go to a family lawyer for criminal law advice or anything like that, because they're the specialist. Go see the specialist. And you don't have to go see one, go see 2 or 3 specialists, but go see them and take advice. Because it's that analogy, if you're a doctor and I go to you and say, my shoulder's hurting, what can I do? And you tell me, do this. And if I go to the dentist and say, my shoulder's hurting,
exactly,
who are you going to go get the advice from? You're going to speak, hopefully you're going to take the doctor's advice as opposed to the dentist's advice. So go see the right person.
Wow.
Rather than try and blag it or make it up. And the worst one is my mate in the pub, he said this. And you're like, don't go with your mate in the pub.
Indeed. So why does the word insolvency have such a negative sort of connotation to it?
There's a historic connotation to it. Now, insolvency generally is, the definition of insolvency is inability to pay debt as they fall due, which by its pure definition means you're almost failing. Now, it's human nature to be ashamed of failure. And I think that's why there's that negative connotation to it. Is you're almost admitting to the fact that you're failing,
something went wrong,
or your business is failing, or something like that. And people don't like to admit that they've failed. And I think that's why there's a negative connotation to it. If you go back to the history of insolvency in the UK anyway, pre-2000s maybe, bankruptcy, personal bankruptcy used to be 3 years, used to be bankrupt 3 years. And in those times, you also did in the company insolvencies, there were adverts in the London Gazette, which no one reads, and there were adverts in the local press. So people got to know about it. And so, there's that shame factor, and that business failed, or he was a failure. So that is one of the reasons why there's a negative connotation of the word insolvency. And you won't be surprised to see that if you look at a lot of the insolvency practices across the UK, very few of us use the word insolvency in our business names, in what we offer. It's always restructuring, turnaround, advisory, and that kind of stuff, because we're not just insolvency practitioners. It's a full service we offer, and it's a restructuring, and it's all about turnaround and trying to help save the businesses. So it's not about, let's just admit you messed up and name and shame you, because that's not the purpose of the insolvency. It's about trying to help businesses survive, and in a weird kind of way, avoid insolvency.
I think it's that putting that positive spin on something that can be quite negative, isn't it? So going through an insolvency, does it mean that you lose everything? Is that
not necessarily? Not necessarily. Absolutely not. In the business world, and as we mentioned earlier, in the business world, limited companies are still a separate legal entity. So you could be your own individual and you have your own debt issues, but the limited company will have its own limited liability debts and businesses and assets and all that kind of stuff. So that's where the restructuring professionals come into play, because within the insolvency arena, there's liquidations, which is you close the business down and shut up shop and that's it, done. There's administrations and there's CVAs and other sort of restructuring procedures which help businesses, which could either help businesses survive and turn around. So liquidation is a terminal option. Administrations and CVAs are more sort of keeping or trying to keep that business alive and trying to help that business survive. So it doesn't mean you lose everything. And as an insolvency practitioner, our job isn't just to close businesses down and be seen as the vultures and making people redundant and all that kind of stuff. One of the things we have to look at is how we can help the business survive, and that is if we put this business in a different entity through formal procedures, would that help? Or doing it in a CVA where they're putting a proposal to the creditors, and they might get X pence in the pound over a longer period of time, does that provide a better return to creditors? So it's not just you lose everything, it's about how can we save the business, and in some cases it's almost if we can't save the business, what's the damage limitation? How much of it can we save? And then if it's not possible, then we're going to have to close it down. So there are
like a management tool, isn't it?
It's which options we take, and let's not. It's not all terminal, and we are not seen as all vultures.
So, Rehan, why should people reach out to insolvency practitioners like yourself?
So one of the things that you are insolvency practitioners, we're all licensed insolvency practitioners, so we have to go through rigorous training, and we have to pass some seriously tough exams to actually get the license, and we're heavily regulated, so there's lots of training courses and experience that we have to undertake, but the main thing is that you are paying for experience. I've been doing insolvency for 20 years, and there's some people who have been doing it longer than me. So we would have seen a lot of situations, a lot of examples, and a lot of companies that have gone through the process. So there's a lot of that experience is what you're paying for. So let's say there's a situation with a care home. So I've done a few care homes in the past, so I can say, right, in that situation, this is what I did there. And it would potentially work in your situation. So you're paying for what we've done in the past. The insolvency procedures are relatively statutory, and there's a set procedure on how to put a company into liquidation and how to put a company into administration. So they're procedural, and you can follow the rule book, so to speak, to get that done. But what you're paying for is the experience that the insolvency practitioner and the team have had in their sort of career to date. So that's what you're paying for. And I always say to people is, don't necessarily look at who's got the cheapest price. Because the cheapest isn't always the best. It's the experience and the knowledge that you're paying for.
It's priceless, isn't it? And I think, Rehan, you've already answered the next question. So there's a lot of insolvency practitioners out there. So what makes you special? So I'm going to say a few words. So from what you've already told me, it's that wealth of experience, and it's that giving a range of options, and being that person, that people are going to trust.
I think that's very true. It's the experience that you're definitely paying for. But the other thing which I think sets me, and I hate boasting about myself, but the one thing that sets me amongst different from others is that I've ran my own business. So this business, that the Quantuma business, we set up our own business some 15 years ago now. So we set up our own business 15 years ago as an insolvency practice, and we grew it to the animal that it's become over the years. We've had a few acquisitions and mergers over the years, including ourselves. So we merged into Quantuma back in 2019, and Quantuma wasn't as big as it was now. We were still relatively small in comparison to what we are now. Back in 19, pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID.
So that experience of running my own business, I have and still do hold various hats. So, the HR, the marketing, the banking, the finance, all that, those experiences I have personally gained. So I can then relate to a business owner, and when they come to you and say, I've got this problem, I've got this issue, and this is what I need to do, this is my concerns, I can say to them, right, okay, this is how we deal with that problem, this is how we deal with that problem. So that practical experience, and other insolvency, like I said, there's loads of insolvency practitioners. Now, a lot of them have worked in the Big Four, the PwCs, the KPMGs, and other large entities, but there'll be a few that have run their own business. And that is the experience that I think a lot of people cannot relate to businesses. So I can relate to the business owner when they come to me and say, my business is struggling, and I've got problems and this, and that. So I can emotionally relate to that, because running a business isn't easy. And you go through that ups and downs, so I can sort of relate to
in the current climate.
Absolutely. So I think that's that creativity of how to think outside the box when it comes to running a business. I can then say to them, right, we're going to do this procedure, but also think about this, think about that, have this in mind, and almost give them a packaged idea to say, this is how you need to make the thing happen. And that's the thing. And I think the other advantage I have, and just touched on a bit of our history, is that over the years, so we set up our own business in 2011. We then got approached by Quantuma to join the party because they were quite a southern firm at the time. They approached us and said, look, we like what you're doing, we like the operation, but we want to be moving up north. Finally joining the party. So at the time we had Bradford, Nottingham and Birmingham as our offices, and they asked us if we wanted to join them. So we joined them back in 2019 after a bit of discussions and negotiating. So that was almost like a sole practitioner. So the old business was also sole practitioner. Right. I then moved into an LLP structure with Quantuma. Right. So that was 2019. 2020 COVID came. We then got approached by a PLC who wanted to buy us out. So we then sold them the business and we became a PLC, which was an interesting journey. And then in 2023, we delisted the business and sold it to a private equity house. So in the space of 5 years, I went from sole trader almost. So that was a limited company with my business partner, LLP, PLC, private equity. So I've been through virtually all the stages, all the sort of corporate structures in the space of 5 years, which most people don't do in a whole career.
I'm going to say that's amazing.
So I can talk to people with confidence and with experience as to what potential issues and hurdles and problems you might incur in the different legal structures in the corporate world. And I think I should boast about this a lot more, but I don't. That's probably one of the things that I can talk to people about with confidence, that this is how you will run the business going forward.
So in the BAME community, are insolvency procedures utilised?
Good question. They are used. Businesses do use it, but it's not used as much as it should do. Or but insolvency in itself is quite an unknown procedure, and it's raising the sort of the knowledge of these options that are available to business owners, and letting them understand what options are available. Because insolvency is sometimes not straightforward. There's complicated procedures, and it's that thing, you don't know what you don't know, and if you don't know about it, you're not even going to think about it. So it's getting insolvency above the parapet, so people know that this is an option and it can help the business.
I was going to say, it feels like it's more of a sort of like a management help tool,
it's more
rather than somebody saying you've gone bankrupt.
Exactly, and I think that there's that definition, there's that distinction between insolvency as well, because a creditor can make you bankrupt, or in personal situation make bankrupt, or a creditor can issue winding up petition against the company. So personally, so you can have a creditor-led insolvency, and you can have a director-led insolvency. So, it's a case of making sure that you understand and know what procedures are available. So it is used in the BAME community. As the BAME community develops and becomes more sophisticated, and the business structures become a little bit more complicated, and there's group structures and all that kind of stuff, I think the advice that they receive will be better quality. They won't necessarily go to the what I call glorified bookkeepers and small lawyers and accountants, because they have a place. The SME accountants have a place, but their knowledge is also sort of refined and limited. And as the business grows, you will need potentially an auditor or more sophisticated advice, maybe some tax advice, or specialist tax advice, or specialist restructuring advice. And that's when you will get better quality advice. And you'll need, at some point, some people do need that advice. And like I said, as BAME community businesses become a lot more sophisticated, a lot bigger in value, in size, and stature, those pieces of advice become very relevant. So it is used, and I think it will continue to be used in the future.
So, Rehan, last question. So in the current climate, the way that the economy is and the recent battering that businesses have taken, what are the key takeaways for business and individuals that may be facing financial difficulties?
From my perspective, what I always say to people is get advice as early as possible. Don't bury your head in the sand. Make sure you're going out and seeing people and speaking to people, whether that is your accountant, your lawyer, insolvency practitioners, whoever, because most of them, if they don't know the advice, they will find someone or recommend you to speak to someone. So get advice as early as possible. Don't be afraid to reach out, because in the SME and the mid-market space, being a director or being a couple of directors in a business, it's still a lonely world out there. And you need to go out and speak to people about your problems, if they are problems, because a lot of people will be there to help. Don't be thinking this is a battle that you need to fight yourself. It's something that you can go out and get support on, and people are always happy to help. So I think they're the two main things I will always say to people is get out early and don't be afraid to reach out. Even if that is friends of yours, they will have people, they will know people. Networks. So, it's going out and not necessarily admitting your problem, but if there's an issue, facing the challenge, face it head on. Don't just ignore it, because if you ignore it, it'll get worse.
That is brilliant. This has been really informative, Rehan, and thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you for coming down.
Brilliant. Thank you.